A black man in turn stood in the lobby and greeted a deaf visitor in perfect sign language, not knowing that the visitor was actually the CEO. Moments later, a revelation shook everyone to their core. Let's continue this story. The office lobby was buzzing with the usual Monday morning rush. Phones rang. The echo of footsteps bounced across polished marble floors, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air. But right at the center of this corporate whirlwind, something happened that no one expected. A young black intern, barely a week into his position, noticed a man entering through the glass doors. Unlike the other visitors dressed in sleek suits and rushing with briefcases, this man paused at the entrance, scanning the room with careful eyes. He looked lost, disconnected, almost as if the noise and chatter of the lobby didn't touch him at all. The intern's name was Jordan. At just 21, he was fresh out of college and eager to prove himself. His main job wasn't glamorous, fetching files, delivering mail, setting up meeting rooms, but he carried it out with pride, hoping each small task would bring him one step closer to his dream of landing a permanent role in this prestigious company. That morning, while balancing a stack of papers and nervously checking his to-do list, Jordan noticed the man again. He realized something was different about him. The man's eyes darted around, but his body language suggested uncertainty, even isolation. And then it hit Jordan. The man wasn't responding to the receptionist's words. The woman at the front desk asked, "Sir, can I help you?" Twice, but the visitor didn't react. He simply stood there, hands loosely folded, glancing around as if searching for an anchor in the storm. Jordan's heart skipped. He had seen this before. The man was deaf. Jordan hesitated for just a second, wondering if he should step in. After all, he was just an intern. But a memory rushed back to him. His late grandmother, who had been hard of hearing, and the countless afternoons he spent learning basic sign language to communicate with her. He wasn't fluent, not by a long shot, but he knew enough to greet, ask simple questions, and show respect. Taking a deep breath, Jordan placed the papers on a nearby counter, walked over to the man, and slowly signed, "Hello, do you need help?" The man's eyes lit up instantly, as though someone had finally unlocked a door to his world. His face softened, and he returned the sign, "Yes." "Meeting. CEO." Jordan blinked. "CEO?" He thought maybe he had misunderstood, so he carefully signed again. "You want to meet the CEO?" The visitor nodded firmly, his expression serious yet grateful. Jordan's hands trembled slightly, but he managed to sign back, "Wait. I help." He gestured kindly for the man to follow him and guided him past the confused receptionist, who raised her eyebrows but said nothing. Inside, Jordan's mind was racing. What if this man really had an appointment with the CEO? Why hadn't anyone prepared for this? And more importantly, why did no one else know sign language in an international company of this size? He didn't have answers, but what he did know was that at that moment, he was the bridge between two worlds, the hearing and the silent. As they walked through the corridors, Jordan signed slowly, asking the man his name. "Thomas," came the reply. The way Thomas signed his name carried a certain dignity, a practiced smoothness. Jordan couldn't help but think there was more to this man than met the eye. He wasn't dressed like a typical corporate executive. No flashy suit, no leather briefcase, just a simple shirt, worn-out jacket, and a notebook tucked under his arm. Yet there was something commanding about his presence. Finally, they reached the elevators. Jordan pressed the button, trying to mask his nervousness. If he was caught escorting a random visitor directly to the upper floors without authorization, he could get in trouble, maybe even lose his internship. But something inside told him this was important. The way Thomas carried himself, the trust he placed in Jordan with just a few signed words, gave Jordan courage. When the elevator doors slid shut, silence enveloped them. Jordan couldn't help but sign, "Are you nervous?" Thomas chuckled softly and signed back, "No. Curious. Curious." The word lingered in Jordan's mind as the numbers climbed. Who was this man, really? And why was he here to see the CEO? The elevator chimed, opening into the top floor, where the atmosphere shifted. The air felt heavier, more serious. Assistants moved briskly, papers shuffled, phones buzzed with urgent calls. Everyone here seemed to know their purpose. Jordan suddenly felt small, an intern way out of his depth. But then Thomas touched his arm lightly, nodding in reassurance, as if telling him, "You're doing fine." They stopped outside the CEO's office, a towering set of glass doors with frosted panels. Jordan hesitated. Should he knock? Should he even be here? Before he could decide, the doors swung open from the inside, and there stood the CEO himself, a tall, commanding man with streaks of silver in his hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and an air of authority that filled the hallway. He looked at Jordan first, then at Thomas. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice deep and measured. Jordan's heart pounded. Words stumbled in his throat. He wanted to explain, but before he could, Thomas stepped forward, lifted his hands, and began to sign directly to the CEO. The CEO froze, watching every movement with an intensity that made Jordan hold his breath. Something about this moment felt electric, as though the air itself had shifted. Jordan realized with a chill, this wasn't just a visitor. This wasn't just a random meeting. Whatever Thomas had come for was about to change everything. The CEO's eyes flickered with surprise as Thomas's hands moved gracefully in the language of silence. Each sign was deliberate, filled with meaning, and though Jordan couldn't understand all of it, he caught glimpses, words like partnership, truth, and future. The CEO didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied Thomas with an expression Jordan couldn't quite read. Was it recognition? Was it shock? Or perhaps something deeper, hidden beneath years of corporate discipline? "Who is this man?" the CEO finally asked, his voice calm but edged with curiosity. Jordan's mouth went dry. Sir, he said he came to see you. He's deaf, so I use sign language to help him get here." The CEO tilted his head slightly, his sharp gaze softening for just a fraction of a second. "You know sign language?" Jordan nodded nervously. "Just a little, sir. I learned it from my grandmother." The CEO gave a slow nod, then shifted his attention back to Thomas. For a moment, the air seemed to thicken with silence, the entire office buzzing in the background, yet fading into insignificance. Finally, the CEO gestured toward the office. "Come in," he said firmly. Jordan froze. Should he go in too? He was just the intern. He didn't belong in the CEO's private office. But then Thomas looked back at him, signing a simple, unmistakable word. "Stay." Against all his instincts, Jordan stepped inside. The CEO's office was vast, filled with tall windows that overlooked the city skyline. Sunlight poured across polished oak floors, casting long shadows over the sleek furniture. On one wall hung portraits of past company founders, their stern faces watching over every decision made within these walls. The CEO sat behind his massive desk, folding his hands, eyes locked on Thomas. "All right," the CEO said, his tone measured. "Tell me why you're here." Thomas opened his notebook, flipped a few pages, and slid it across the desk. The CEO leaned forward, scanning the handwritten notes. Jordan, trying not to intrude, stayed back near the door, but he could see the CEO's expression shift, confusion first, then realization, then something that looked almost like pain. After what felt like an eternity, the CEO leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "So it's true," he murmured under his breath. Then he looked up at Thomas. "Why now? After all these years?" Jordan's heart thumped. He wanted to ask, "What's true? Who is this man?" But the weight of the moment held him silent. Thomas signed again, his movements more forceful this time. Jordan caught fragments. Justice. Ignored. Forgotten. The CEO's jaw tightened, but his eyes glistened with something Jordan never expected, regret. Finally, the CEO stood up, pacing toward the window. His silhouette loomed against the light. "Jordan," he said suddenly, without turning around. "Yes, sir?" Jordan stammered. "You've already seen more than most people in this building ever will. Tell me, do you know what this company was built on?" Jordan swallowed hard. "Innovation, sir. Hard work." The CEO let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's what we tell the world. But the truth is more complicated." He turned, his eyes heavy with a history Jordan couldn't begin to imagine. "This man," he gestured toward Thomas, "has every right to be here. In fact, if things had gone differently, he would be sitting where I am today." Jordan's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Thomas signed something quickly, and Jordan recognized the words, "Family. Legacy." The CEO nodded grimly. "Yes, family." The room fell silent again. The ticking of a clock on the far wall echoed louder than it should have. Jordan felt like he had stepped into the middle of a story decades in the making, one that was unraveling piece by piece before his eyes. Finally, the CEO pulled a leather folder from a locked drawer and placed it on the desk. He opened it, revealing old photographs, faded documents, and letters that looked worn from being handled too many times. He slid one of the photos across to Jordan. Jordan picked it up carefully. It showed a much younger version of the CEO, standing beside another man, tall, confident, with the same piercing eyes. But what shocked Jordan was the man's smile. It was Thomas. His hand trembled as he looked from the photo to the man standing in front of him now. Thomas seemed older, weathered by time, but it was unmistakably him. You knew each other? Jordan asked quietly. The CEO nodded. We weren't just colleagues. We were partners. Best friends. Brothers, almost. But something happened, something I buried deep, hoping it would never resurface. And yet, here he is. Jordan looked at Thomas, whose expression carried both strength and sorrow. He signed a phrase Jordan barely understood, but it was enough. Truth cannot stay silent. The CEO closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with a resolve Jordan hadn't seen before. You're right. It's time. Jordan felt a shiver run down his spine. He didn't know what truth they were talking about, or what history had been buried, but he knew one thing for certain. This was bigger than him, bigger than his internship, bigger than anything he had expected when he walked into the building that morning. As the CEO and Thomas locked eyes across the desk, Jordan realized he wasn't just witnessing a reunion. He was standing at the edge of a revelation that could shake the company to its core. And deep inside, he couldn't help but wonder, was he meant to be here for this very moment? Jordan's hands were clammy as he placed the old photograph back on the CEO's desk. His mind was spinning, caught between disbelief and curiosity. He had walked into work that morning thinking about coffee orders and filing cabinets. And now he was standing inside the CEO's office, witnessing a confrontation between two men whose past seemed tangled in a story bigger than anything he could have imagined. Thomas leaned forward, signing slowly this time, as though making sure Jordan could catch each word. They erased me. My work. My voice. Everything. The CEO's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Instead, he listened, his expression a mixture of shame and defensiveness. Jordan translated softly, his voice trembling as he spoke aloud what Thomas was signing. He says he gave his life to this company, that he was one of the original minds behind its success, but because he was deaf, people dismissed him, ignored him, and when it came time for recognition, he was cut out. The CEO lowered his gaze. For the first time, Jordan saw something raw in his eyes, not just regret, but guilt. It's true, the CEO admitted in a low voice. Thomas was brilliant. He saw things no one else did. His ideas shaped our foundation. But in those days, the board didn't believe a deaf man could lead. They thought investors wouldn't take us seriously. They pressured me, and I let it happen. I took the role. I became the face of the company. Jordan stared at him, stunned. So you took credit? The CEO's voice hardened. I didn't want to, but I didn't fight it either. And that's the same as stealing. I know that now. Thomas's hands moved quickly, anger flashing in his eyes. Jordan did his best to translate. You chose silence when you should have spoken. You chose comfort over courage. You let them bury me. The words hung in the air like thunder. The CEO didn't deny it. He simply looked down, his broad shoulders weighed with decades of decisions that had built his empire. Jordan's chest tightened. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Here was a man the world admired, a titan of industry, a leader whose name was spoken with reverence. And yet, behind the marble walls and polished glass, there was this hidden betrayal. Thomas slammed his notebook shut and signed forcefully. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for truth. Jordan repeated it aloud, his voice carrying more conviction than he realized. The CEO's eyes flickered toward Jordan, as if acknowledging that the young intern had now become more than a bystander. He was the bridge between the silent and the speaking, the witness who gave Thomas's words power in the room. Silence stretched on. Jordan could hear the faint hum of the city outside, the muffled conversations of assistants down the hall, but inside this office, it felt like time itself had paused. Finally, the CEO spoke. If the world learns about this, everything changes. The company, my reputation, the legacy we built. But maybe that's what should happen. He looked directly at Thomas. You deserve to be recognized. More than that, You deserve justice." Thomas's eyes softened slightly, but his hands moved again, gentler this time. "I don't care about their applause. I care about the young, the next generation. I want them to know that deafness is not weakness, that silence doesn't mean invisibility." Jordan's throat tightened as he voiced the translation. He felt the truth in those words pierce straight through him. The CEO's gaze shifted to Jordan. "And you," he said slowly. "Why did you step in back there? You didn't have to. You could have let the receptionist handle it." Jordan hesitated, caught off guard. "Because I know what it feels like to be overlooked, to have people assume you're not enough. My grandmother, she taught me that everyone deserves a voice, no matter what form it takes." The CEO studied him for a long moment, then gave the faintest nod, as if some unspoken puzzle piece had clicked into place. The weight of the moment was suddenly interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. The CEO's assistant poked her head in. "Sir, the board is ready for you. They're waiting in the conference room." The CEO straightened, his authority returning in an instant. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." As the assistant left, he turned back to Thomas and Jordan. "This is it. If we do this, if we bring the truth to light, the board won't take it quietly. They'll fight back. Hard." Thomas signed one word. Jordan repeated it aloud. "Good." The CEO let out a slow breath. "Then it's time." He reached for the folder of old documents and photographs, tucking it under his arm. He looked at Jordan, then at Thomas, and for the first time, there was no division between them. Only a strange, fragile unity. "Come with me," the CEO said. Jordan's stomach nodded. He wasn't sure if he was ready for whatever was about to happen, but something inside him whispered that he was meant to be part of this moment. Together, the three of them stepped out of the office, walking down the long corridor toward the boardroom. Every step felt heavier, as though they were marching toward a trial. The polished floor reflected their silhouettes, the intern, the forgotten visionary, and the CEO, carrying the weight of truth. Jordan didn't know how the board would react, or what this revelation would mean for the future of the company. But one thing was certain. The silence that had been forced on Thomas for so many years was about to be broken. And Jordan, the unnoticed intern, was right in the middle of history being rewritten. The boardroom doors loomed ahead like the entrance to a battlefield. Jordan had walked past them dozens of times during his internship, usually carrying stacks of papers or delivering coffee. But never once had he imagined he'd step inside as part of something this monumental. His palms were damp, and he rubbed them nervously against his pants as he followed Thomas and the CEO. When the CEO pushed the doors open, the room fell into a hush. The long mahogany table stretched out under the glow of recessed lighting, polished until it reflected the stern faces of the board members seated around it. Men and women in tailored suits glanced up, their conversations silenced by the unexpected sight. Every head turned, every pair of eyes curious, puzzled, or wary. "Gentlemen, ladies," the CEO said, his voice steady but carrying an undertone of gravity. "Before we begin today's agenda, there's something you need to hear. Something I've kept hidden for far too long." Murmurs rippled across the room. A man in a pinstripe suit adjusted his glasses. "Is this urgent? We have quarterly numbers to review." The CEO's gaze sharpened. "This is more important than numbers." He stepped aside, gesturing toward Thomas. "This man, Thomas, is the reason we exist as a company today. Without him, there would be no empire, no profits, no legacy. And yet, most of you don't even know his name." The board members exchanged skeptical glances. A woman leaned forward, folding her hands. "And why is that?" The CEO's jaw tightened. "Because when we started this company, the board believed no one would invest in a deaf leader. They thought it would make us look weak. So they cut him out. And his voice faltered, but then he steadied it. "I let them. I became the face. I took the credit. He paid the price." A stunned silence followed. Jordan's chest pounded as he watched the truth echo through the room like thunder. He glanced at Thomas, who stood silently, eyes burning with quiet strength. The man in pinstripes scoffed. "With all due respect, sir, dredging up old history helps no one. Business is about results. And look at where we are now, market leaders, respected worldwide. Why risk damaging our reputation for sentiment?" Jordan's stomach turned at the word sentiment. He wanted to shout that this wasn't about sentiment. It was about justice, about giving voice to someone who had been silenced. Thomas lifted his hands and began to sign. His movements were calm but powerful, his eyes locked on the room full of executives. Jordan stepped forward instinctively, his role clear now. He says, Jordan translated, his voice trembling but growing steadier with each word. He's not here to destroy the company. He's here because the company can never truly lead if it hides the truth. If it continues to silence those who don't fit the mold. He says young people out there, deaf, disabled, overlooked, they deserve to see someone like them acknowledged. They deserve to know their voices matter. The board shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their eyes, others frowned, but a few nodded faintly, as though struck by the weight of the message. Another board member spoke, his tone sharp. And what exactly do you want us to do? Rewrite history? Hand over control? Thomas signed firmly. Jordan's voice carried his message. I want recognition. I want programs that give opportunities to people like me. I want this company to prove it values more than money. Show the world that silence doesn't mean invisibility. The room buzzed with murmurs again. The pinstripe man raised his voice. This is absurd. We'll be ridiculed. Investors will panic. The CEO's fist slammed against the table, startling everyone into silence. No, he said, his voice ringing with authority. They'll respect us. Because for once, we'll be honest. We'll show courage instead of hiding behind fear. Jordan's eyes widened. For the first time, he saw the CEO not just as a powerful businessman, but as a man finally ready to face the truth. But not everyone was convinced. If this goes public, another board member warned, we could lose millions. Stockholders will demand answers. Thomas signed again, his movements sharp, urgent. Jordan translated, if you measure everything in millions, then you've already lost. A company without integrity is bankrupt, even if the numbers look good. That landed like a hammer on stone. The boardroom fell silent again, the truth too heavy to dismiss with corporate jargon. The CEO looked around the table, his gaze sweeping over each face. You can resist this. You can try to bury the truth again. But I won't. Not this time. This man is my brother in every way that matters, and the world will know his name. The room erupted in protests, questions, arguments. Some slammed their folders shut in frustration. Others tried to whisper among themselves. Jordan's heart raced. This was chaos, but beneath it, he sensed a shift, a crack in the foundation of lies that had stood for decades. Suddenly, the pinstripe man stood, his voice rising above the din. If you do this, you'll tear everything apart. You'll ruin us. The CEO faced him squarely, his eyes blazing. No, I'll free us. The words carried such force that the room fell quiet again. Even the pinstripe man sat back down, scowling but defeated. In the heavy silence, Jordan realized he was witnessing something rare. The moment a powerful man chose truth over convenience. And beside him, Thomas stood taller than ever, no longer the forgotten partner, but the symbol of resilience. The CEO placed the folder of old documents at the center of the table. These are the records. The proof. Tomorrow, I'll announce it publicly. The world will finally know who Thomas is and what he built. Jordan felt his throat tighten with emotion. He looked at Thomas, who gave him the faintest nod of gratitude. For the first time, Jordan felt like more than an intern. He was part of history being rewritten. But deep inside, a flicker of fear still lingered. Would the world accept this truth? Or would it try to bury it all over again? As the meeting ended, Jordan knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same. The boardroom slowly emptied, each member filing out with stiff shoulders and unreadable expressions. Some looked unsettled, others thoughtful, and a few visibly angry. The air was heavy, as though the truth revealed inside those four walls had cracked open something that could never be sealed again. Jordan remained seated, his pulse still racing, his mind spinning with everything he had just witnessed. Thomas closed his notebook and tucked it under his arm. His face was calm now, though Jordan could sense the storm of emotions beneath his quiet exterior. For decades, he had been invisible, his contributions buried under the weight of corporate decisions and prejudice. Yet here he was, standing inside the very boardroom that had once denied him, finally being acknowledged. The CEO lingered near the window, staring out at the city skyline bathed in golden evening light. His reflection looked older than before, burdened but strangely lighter too. After a long silence, he turned to Thomas. You were right, he said quietly. The truth couldn't stay buried. Not forever. Thomas signed, and Jordan voiced the words. The truth always finds a way. The CEO nodded, his eyes glistening, and then, for the first time, he extended his hand to Thomas. It was more than a gesture of apology. It was an offering of respect. Slowly, Thomas reached out and clasped it. Two men, once brothers divided by silence, reunited not by words, but by something stronger. Jordan felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't sure if he should stay, but Thomas turned to him and signed, "Thank you." Jordan blinked, his chest tightening with emotion. "For what?" he asked softly. Thomas smiled faintly and signed again. "For seeing me." Those three words hit Jordan harder than anything else that day. For seeing me. That was all Thomas had wanted for decades. Not pity, not sympathy, just acknowledgement of his existence, his worth, his voice in a world that had chosen to ignore him. The CEO broke the silence. "Tomorrow morning, I'll hold a press conference. The world will hear your story. They'll know the truth of what we built together. And this company will change." Jordan's eyes widened. A press conference? This wasn't just about boardrooms and whispered apologies. This was about telling the entire world. Thomas signed slowly, thoughtfully. "The world doesn't need to see my pain. They need to see possibility." Jordan translated, and the CEO's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then that's what we'll give them." The next morning, the building buzzed with unusual energy. Reporters crowded outside, cameras flashing, microphones ready. Employees whispered in the hallways, rumors spreading like wildfire. Inside the auditorium, hundreds of staff gathered, curiosity and confusion etched across their faces. Jordan stood near the stage, his heart hammering. He had been asked to stand there with Thomas, to interpret for him. The thought terrified him. He wasn't a professional interpreter, just a young intern who knew enough sign language to connect. But when he looked at Thomas, standing tall with quiet confidence, Jordan drew strength. The CEO stepped to the podium first, the crowd silencing instantly. His voice carried across the room. "For years, you've known me as the face of this company. But what you don't know is that the man who helped me build it, the man whose ideas shaped our foundation, was erased from history. Not because of lack of talent, not because of failure, but because he was deaf. And because we, as a company, chose silence over truth." Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed furiously. Jordan could feel the shift in the air. The CEO gestured toward Thomas. "This is Thomas. My partner. My brother. The man who should have stood beside me all along." Thomas stepped forward. The room was utterly still. He lifted his hands and began to sign, his movements graceful and commanding. Jordan's voice shook at first, but soon it steadied as he translated. "I am not here for revenge. I am here for recognition, not for myself alone, but for every person who has ever been told they don't belong because they are different. Deaf, disabled, overlooked, it does not matter. We all deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. The world measures worth in noise and power, but silence has its own strength. And today, I stand here as proof that silence cannot erase truth." The words echoed like a heartbeat through the auditorium. Some employees had tears in their eyes. Others nodded solemnly. Even the reporters, usually hardened by endless stories, looked moved. When Thomas finished, the room erupted in applause. Not polite, obligatory applause, but thunderous, emotional clapping that seemed to shake the walls. People rose to their feet, cheering, shouting his name. Jordan felt tears sting his eyes as he looked at Thomas, who stood humbly, his face calm, but glowing with a pride that came from within. The CEO stood beside him, no longer as the singular hero of the company, but as a man finally ready to share the stage. In that moment, Jordan realized something profound. He had started this journey as an invisible intern, someone who fetched coffee and ran errands. But by stepping forward in a single moment of courage, by greeting Thomas in sign language, he had unlocked a story that changed everything. After the conference, as the crowd dispersed and the cameras were packed away, Thomas approached Jordan. He signed with a small, knowing smile. "You changed my life." Jordan shook his head, emotion catching in his throat. "No, sir. You changed mine." The CEO placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "This company needs people like you. People who don't just see numbers, but people. How would you like to stay, not as an intern, but as part of our future?" Jordan's eyes widened. A permanent role? His dream? He could barely find words. I'd be honored, sir." Thomas signed one last phrase, his expression warm. Jordan translated it aloud, his voice breaking with emotion. This is only the beginning. And he knew it was true. The silence had been broken. The truth had been spoken. And from that day forward, none of their lives, or the company itself, would ever be the same again. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful and inspiring ones like it, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what comes next.